Welcome back to Adventures in Blockchain. So I'm Gregory from DAP University, and I've got my co-panelist Roman here, and also a special guest, Sean Lee from Fortmatic, to talk about building Web3 dApps. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course, as always, we've got Roman here. Hey, Roman.
Hi, everyone. It's Roman Storm here. Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have this discussion today because Roman invited Sean to the channel today, and I'm actually curious to hear a little bit more about their story, their background together. But before we jump into all that, Sean, you want to give us a really quick elevator pitch for what you all do at Fortmatic in case people listening aren't quite familiar?
Yeah, for sure. So Fortmatic is an SDK that Ethereum blockchain developers can embed into their dApp so that they can use just their phone number to authenticate and interact with that, right? Therefore, reducing so many steps to onboarding because users don't have to rely on Chrome extensions.
Yeah, very cool. I like that a lot. So maybe let's talk about that a little more so that people are, crystal clear on the problem that you're solving. Maybe talk a little bit about, the struggles that we're facing right now with onboarding users with blockchain applications, dApps, whatever you want to call them, and then like specifically the pain points that you all solve there.
Right. The most commonly known one is the, over 20 steps to get started with the dApp. Right?
Exactly.
And it's really also platform dependent, right? For example, most commonly used browser is Chrome on the desktop, but a lot of users are also on mobile, right? But mobile browsers, through Twitter, that's how a lot of blockchain projects are discovered.
Right.
But when they click into the link, they can't get started right away, right? Before having to download a mobile wallet or remember to go back to their desktop and try out the cool app. So, being able to just directly try out the application in a mobile web browser is a big deal. So, that's one of the things that we can really solve. And, in fact, over 65% of our user interactions happen on the mobile web browser.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, and it's just like a nightmare, trying to convert people and customers, especially if you're talking about trying to do any kind of advertising or anything like that. It's like, just like you said, if you see, content floating around about your project and people try to click through, it's just like, how do you get there from point A to point B without, some crazy song and dance? And that's awesome, man.
Right. And also, in countries like China, Chrome Web Store is banned. So,
yeah,
it's not possible to use decentralized application.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, very cool. So tell me a little bit about maybe some of the traction that you all have seen in doing this. Do you have any notable projects that have started, using your SDK and kind of what they've done? Do you have maybe case studies to say hey, this person got a lot more users because they used us?
I can't give exact numbers right now, but we are very focused on getting dApp integrations. Right, so we have a lot of partners listed on our page. Some notable ones. This week was actually great. We onboarded a lot of new dApps like Banker. One of the top 5 decentralized exchanges.
Yeah, totally.
And 1inch Exchange. We have Token Set, Zerion, Cent.co, Radar.
Yeah.
Right. There's we're on our way to getting Fortmatic integrated into, most well-known dApps.
What's the most used dApp that have a lot of users and success story when they integrated with a Fortmatic?
Yeah, I'd say the top 3 are definitely Cent, Token Sets, and Zerion.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. I'd be interested in talking to some of the, I've actually interviewed some of those guys on my YouTube channel before over at DAP University. So I'd be curious to maybe we'll have some of them on the podcast soon.
yeah, it's amazing working with all these partners. Yeah, and that's what made Fortmatic successful too.
Yeah, very cool. So just tell, this is a pretty developer focused podcast. So maybe tell us a little bit just about how the SDK works. Like, what does it really do?
Yeah. So essentially it's really, really simple. And I care a lot about, having a very frictionless like developer experience.
Right.
So what we did is, we did a lot of, hard work and testing so that Fortmatic works with existing Web3 applications. So essentially, if your app already works with MetaMask, there isn't that much code you have to change, right? So essentially, you only need to give users the option to select a Web3 provider in order to enable Fortmatic, right? And the very common use case is, Fortmatic plus MetaMask, right? For different types of audience, kind of letting the user pick the different authentication options.
Right. That makes total sense. So anybody who's maybe not quite familiar, so, MetaMask is probably the most popular Chrome extension that essentially turns your web browser into a blockchain browser. And basically, there's some tooling, a really common tooling that you kind of configure underneath the hood in your web apps in order to connect to this special browser extension to let your web browser talk to the blockchain. And what you're saying is people can rely on this existing tooling and just connect Fortmatic the same way, right?
Yep. So this way, the apps don't have to change their user experience that much.
Not to change their code that much, really, anything like that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so that we can get integrated easily and quickly so that the dApps can start trying us out.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and so how does it look like from the user perspective? Like, let's say I don't have a MetaMask and I'm using some app that has a Fortmatic.
Yeah, so, essentially it looked like, if you're familiar with Stripe checkout, right? So it will pop up this kind of modal dialogue, right, from the center of the page. In Stripe's case, it asks for credit card information, but for our case, it asks for user's phone number first. So user typing the phone number, then user will receive a SMS security code. And after the security code, the user has to type in their user set PIN, right? And this is to help mitigate some of the SIM swapping concerns. And then after the user is authenticated, then this user can interact with the dApp, sending transactions, interacting with smart contracts, without having to kind of do any third-party installations.
Wow, that's super easy.
Yeah,
that's good. I'm curious, like, what's your background? Like, how did you come up with, such a neat product with a great experience?
How'd you get into blockchain too? I think that's another question. Maybe we can get to that. Everybody seems like they've got a story.
This is quite a journey. So before Fortmatic, I was at a company called Docker. I was product lead and design lead there for their kind of developer focused products. And one of the products that I worked on extensively is Docker Desktop. And essentially it's this very invisible application, but is actually being used by over millions of developers every month.
Yeah, I've got the little whale in my system tray right now.
Yep. So that's me working closely with the founder, the staff engineering team. So learned so much there about how to create great developer experience, right? And part of it is actually staying out of developers' way, right? And this is it's actually quite challenging to build it, right? So there's a really interesting story with that whale icon. So we had this. So before Docker, I founded a company called CacheFly. So what it did was it made Docker accessible on the desktop, especially on Mac and Windows, when Docker was predominantly Linux. So we create Fortmatic. It's a UI around Docker. It's super easy to use. And, after we launched it, we were acquired by Docker. And, since then we've been working on the product, but there was this issue, right? Where there was this dependency on VirtualBox. And, the problem with VirtualBox is it's got a 30% failure rate for our user onboarding. Whereas the user will try to install it and then it will fail, and then the developer won't be able to set up Docker and try it out. So that's a huge problem. So, the founder and a bunch of the team, we flew to France, met up with Unikernels, which is like this amazing systems engineering team that was acquired. And then, over a week-long hackathon, we hacked the Mac kernel, exposed the internal hypervisor, and basically got rid of MetaMask. Sorry,
no big deal.
VirtualBox.
Wow.
There's some similarities with the drop off there, but and that made a really slick, kind of smooth experience to basically developer onboarding. So that's one of the projects that I was most proud of. But I feel like I need to learn more and pursue something else. So I left Docker and started reading into Ethereum, right? And instantly fell in love with it because it connects with so many things, right? Like politics, economy, finance, interesting like mathematical models, like developer tools and infrastructure, right? Like blockchain is actually an amazing kind of this serverless vision too, because it runs on homogeneous environment with non-siloed business logic in smart contract, and data is shared across different applications, and essentially all that developer have to write is the front end, right? And this in the future, a lot of smart contracts will be ready and available. So it's like a super exciting vision and future that really attracted me into the ecosystem. And I tried to build a couple of dApps first, but couldn't bring myself to launch any of them. And, eventually realized, hey, like it's actually really hard to use MetaMask to interact with these applications for mainstream kind of users. So essentially decided to kind of figure out ways to tackle this problem. And realize it's more of a key management issue than usability issue. And the goal is to really iterate closely with customers and partners to find out the spot that they're the most comfortable with. And then after some early discussions with developers, I connected with my current co-founders and grabbed drink for 5 hours, and next day they quit their jobs. So that's here we are.
Wow.
Almost a year later.
That's amazing. I hope you were also able to get those developers who were able to hack the Mac kernel.
Yeah, not quite sure what they're up to now, but
so someday you're just going to move on from Fortmatic and just start raising money for a living. This is what you're telling me.
No, I'm not that good. I wish I'm really good.
I don't know, man. People just quit their jobs the day after, having five hours worth of drinks with you. Maybe they had a lot of drink.
Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons.
No, that's awesome.
So what are the current challenges as a founder of the Fortmatic you're facing with right now?
Yeah, I'd say for me, it's really a context switching, right? Really takes a toll on me, right? Like as a founder, right? Especially me, I was really focused on product, and I really care about every single detail. But, as the founder and CEO, I have to do, a lot of other things like external communications, telling people more about, what Fortmatic do, meeting different people, right? Getting more partners. So there's a lot of, so my time is basically split up into like these fragments, which makes me like really hard to get in the flow and then to basically really focus on the product and the details. But, we still have a really incredible team that, is really detail oriented so that, we can continue to deliver, these high quality features.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Another question, what kind of products out there in the blockchain space do you find the most exciting?
Yeah, there's quite a bit, right? So I'm actually very excited about what token sets may be able to do. Because for a new user trying to enter the space, there's right now DeFi, like, or decentralized finance, is a very popular, and it's gaining a lot of momentum. But still, for a new user, it's relatively difficult for them to kind of understand everything, right? And then to decide for themselves. But with sets, you can create a combination of tokens, and and each of these tokens have its own properties, which is very interesting. So now anyone who can code can compose a set token using all these decentralized finance protocols to create something that's for a specific type of users, and then instantly have this token available on all decentralized exchanges for users across the world. And I think this is, a huge deal. So, because users are very familiar with things like Wealthfront, right, ETFs, and now you have that for the blockchain, right? So, especially given things like UMA protocol, right? You can maybe in the future digitize like real world assets like S&P 500. Right? You can do S&P 500, right, leveraged packed into a set, right, with Bitcoin. So there's like, you can be really, really creative with it, and it's going to be amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. And there's so much other cool ideas too, right? Like recently there's the launch of Pool Together. So essentially it's a lossless lottery. It sounds sketchy, but it's actually a really cool idea because you can kind of pool together tokens in a smart contract, right? And this smart contract will use this token and leverage compound protocol to generate interest. So, and then when the pool ends, you pick one winner who receives all the tokens that's generated from the interest. And also, every participant will get back their original money they put in. So, this is like a really cool concept that's, not really possible kind of given, the traditional kind of world.
I see. So what advice would you give to blockchain entrepreneurs right now, like who is trying to get into blockchain, they have some idea? What would you advise them to do right now?
There's so much, right? And I think for me, it feels like it's very important to focus on like user and customer experience. It's actually something that's really hard to justify in this world right now because people tend to see user and customer experience as something that you can just like slap on like a feature. But it's not really that. It's like a mentality that is oriented towards users with, really strong empathy, right? And basically every decision you do, every team member you bring on board needs to have that empathy towards the users to build a product that is actually usable, right? Or is appreciated by by your users, and especially given the kind of the limitations of the ecosystem right now. It's actually quite difficult for really new users to understand, adapt, and what blockchain is. So the applications have to do, as a developer, you have to do a lot of the extra work in your user experience to kind of handheld the users and make sure that they understand what's going on, right? Without just dropping them straight into the environment. So for example, CryptoKitties was very successful because they're one of the first applications that really had like this MetaMask kind of onboarding guide, right? That's with very well crafted illustrations, right? So the user feel kind of the delight, the interestingness of this application, right? And it gives them this excitement and delightfulness to actually use it, and then to purchase the CryptoKitties.
Yeah, totally. That makes perfect sense. So I got maybe like a couple more questions here that are somewhat related, and I'm going to kind of just ask them all at the same time. And this is kind of bad form, but maybe you'll kind of get where I'm going with this. We talk a lot about blockchain mass adoption, right? And that's kind of a nebulous concept. We don't necessarily know what that means. I think, in one sense, blockchain's already happened. In another sense, like it can always grow, right? And more people can use it. So maybe like, what does that look like to you? Is that a good goal? What are the barriers to getting there if we're not there right now? And do you see a path forward?
Yeah, so I see it as, there are 3 pillars to the kind of adoption, right? So right now, I think we're, kind of at the really early stage, right? For example, Bitcoin, right? Like basically, everyone has heard about it, right? Like even if they don't understand it. So to some extent, blockchain is getting a lot of mind share, right? And that's actually what's needed for something to take off. And given the kind of crypto winter that we experienced, there's a lot of much more tangible development and improvement around infrastructure, so that we can eventually support like better and better decentralized applications, right? That's built on top of the blockchain. So it's on its way there, right? And back to the 3 pillars, right? I see the first one being ecosystem entry, right? So what that means is users need to be able to get into the crypto ecosystem, right? For example, converting their fiat money into crypto through fiat on-ramp solutions, right? Facebook Libra may also be a very good option because you can instantly tap into like billion users, right? And kind of onboard them into this ecosystem.
Right.
And once users are into the cryptocurrency ecosystem, then the benefit of it really shines, right? So you can like kind of, now they're free, they can go anywhere and do all sorts of interesting things on the blockchain. And there's going to be better regulations too, and standardized processes for new startup or cryptocurrency companies to form. And also the European PSD2 open banking API, right? That's going to make fiat on-ramp much easier too. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on in the entry pillar, right? So that's really on its way, right? A lot of new startups, getting funded to do this too, like Wire and Ramp. Then that leads to the second pillar. It's usability, but to me, it's more like a problem with user focused and key management, right? What I mean that is a lot of people assume usability issue are just people not caring enough, but it's actually people not caring enough of what their users and customers want. So the way I see it is team management is really like this lever, right? It's not black and white, custodial or non-custodial. It's actually, to me, it feels like somewhere in the middle. Makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
To get the majority of users, the mainstream users. So it's a process of continuous refinement and tweaking and see what users are comfortable with and having the ability to continuously evolve their solution. That's really important to us. And then, since we're really trying to get mainstream adoption, on the other spectrum, you get these institutional custodians, right? That's the other spectrum where you need to be like extremely secure, right? Or but at sacrificing a lot of the usability by introducing extra steps. But it makes sense for people who are securing funds at that scale versus just kind of general users trying to interact with some games and DeFi applications on the internet.
Yeah, totally. I think that's an awesome perspective. Yeah. And so it sounds to me like, and this is, this is something that I've kind of gone back and forth with, and I think it depends on the use case, but it sounds to me like, you're talking about users getting into this ecosystem well knowing that they're using the blockchain. Because I've sort of heard this thing, oh, your users don't have to know they're using the blockchain. Well, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of fun, the concept of the blockchain. And users are actually familiar with it through games. So, one of my cousins, he was like a hardcore gamer, right? And he made a lot of money by, buying cryptocurrency, like really, really early on. So I was really curious, and he's not technical at all, right? So once I went back to China, I asked him, why he bought it. And he's saying that, because I play a lot of games, and then games have very similar kind of mechanisms, right? So you get like the virtual digital currency for the game, and then you can trade it. You can kind of make money within the game ecosystem. So when he first saw Bitcoin and Ethereum, he felt a lot that it's very similar to a game, and he felt like there can be some upside to it. So he just didn't think twice and bought it. So I think, we are actually getting more familiar with, virtual currencies and digital currencies as a concept. So I think just blockchain alone is not that intimidating of a concept. But what's more intimidating is, kind of the bareness of the interaction. For example, if you interact with a smart contract, right now it kind of opens this very generic view for users, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's not very informative. It's not very, it's in fact very scary, right? So it's a lot of these things have to kind of continuously refine. And maybe there's going to be multiple kind of layers built on top of it to abstract some of these away. But I think in general, blockchain is becoming less intimidating, and cryptocurrency is becoming a more like familiar concept.
Right. Yeah, totally. No, I think that's awesome. And I think it's a really great perspective from somebody who's, in there building, these on-ramps for users to make it easier and make it, reduce the friction. So that's awesome, Sean. I've really enjoyed having you on the podcast today. I can tell you're, the real deal in there, in the trenches, building all this stuff. So it's been a really great conversation. Before we kind of wrap up here, where can people, if people just want to download, or not download, but people want to get started with Fortmatic like today, like how do they do that?
Yeah, they can visit fortmatic.com. So Fort as in a castle of fort, and then Matic, like automatic. So fortmatic.com. It will provide most of the information. We also have, developer documentation with, getting started guide. So, you can kind of just follow that and get started.
And I just want to add that if you don't want your users to remember the seed phrase, and you can use the Fortmatic to, to let your users use these traditional security models on how they can store their keys, so they can use the Fortmatic and no more MetaMask.
Seed phrase. Yeah, thanks for adding that, Roman. Yeah, that's one of the benefits of Fortmatic too. Is users don't have to remember a seed phrase.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, very cool. Well, also, anything else as far as like people finding you? Are you guys on, you have social media that people can follow? Do you have personal social media that you're interested in people following? Any of that kind of stuff where we can find more about you, what you're working on?
Yeah, so our Twitter is @Fortmatic. My personal Twitter is _Seanli.
Awesome.
SEANLI. Yeah.
Very cool. And we can put links to all this in the podcast description so people can check this out.
Great.
Thank you for joining us, Sean.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, thank you for joining us today.
No, thanks for inviting me. This has been fun.
No, this is really great. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I've even learned a lot myself. So I'm happy that we did this, guys.
Awesome. All right.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, again, thanks, Sean, for coming on today. Thanks, Roman, for lining this up. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here today. Everybody go check out Fortmatic now, like right now after you finish listening to this episode. I know I'm going to. It's super exciting. So again, check out the podcast description notes for all the links and stuff like that. And until next time, thanks for listening to Adventures in Blockchain.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com